This week's update, the producers at One Door Studios are in a full court press for our A-list studio-approved screenwriter. And in case you missed it, some of the brilliant minds over at Legion M, our new partners, interviewed Nova McBee, author of Calculated, Simulated, and soon-to-be-released Activated. Join Taylor, Mandy, and Nova for this week's Calculated Update.
All right, everybody. Hello, Legion M. Happy Monday afternoon, Monday evening. We've got an awesome live stream planned for today. We've got we're so excited is what I wanted to say. We're so excited to be talking to Nova McBee, the author of Calculated and Simulated, the Calculated series, which we are currently in development with One Door Studios to turn into a feature film. It's an amazing young adult fiction novel that transcends the world and economics and mathematics and the universe and everything. It just is really pretty incredible. And so welcome, Nova. We're so excited to have you. We're also on with Mandy Bardisbanian, our VP of Consumer Products and Licensing.
Hey, everybody.
And everything. And so, yeah, welcome to the team, Nova. We're so psyched to have you on.
Well, so am I. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
Awesome. So we may have some in the audience today who haven't read Calculated yet. And so maybe we could just start by giving a quick summary of the series, or at least the first book, just to kind of give people a little bit of an appetizer for the story.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So I have been pitching this book for years as a Count of Monte Cristo meets Mission Impossible type blend of story. And so the main character is a math prodigy who is basically taken because of her gift and what she can do with her gift, taken by the top smugglers in the world. And then it goes into how she gets out of that and who she becomes and what she has to do. I don't know how many spoilers I'm allowed to do in this summary, but there's a big crisis and there's a little romance and there's an action and, you know, bad guys, good guys, transformation, redemption, justice.
Yes.
Purpose.
Yes.
Some amazing buzzwords.
Yes. All the good stuff. Pretty much has all the good stuff. Yeah.
Love it. Oh my gosh, that's so great. And it's so funny because when we first got introduced to this book, into the property, it was described, at least to me especially, as, yeah, like a modern Count of Monte Cristo. And that's one of my favorite books. So much so that I swam the Chateau d'If a while back.
No!
Yeah. In 2019. They do a race called the Défi de Monte Cristo 5K, and you take a boat called the Edmond Dantes out to the Chateau d'If, and then you swim back to... It's amazing.
That is incredible.
And
okay, that book.
It's just...
That book.
It's great.
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I love it. And, you know, it's amazing, too, just the parallels within Calculated, especially. You know, I don't think this is necessarily a spoiler, but, I mean, if you've read Count of Monte Cristo, you know that, you know, a number of chapters, hundreds of pages maybe, are spent in the Chateau d'If, the prison, where, you know, Edmond Dantes and Abbe Faria kind of, like, commiserate together, and he teaches Edmond Dantes sort of everything that he needs to know to kind of, like, act his revenge. But one of the things that I loved a lot about Calculated especially is that Josephine, the lead main character, she sort of already is equipped with everything. Like, she has her superpower going in, and it's a really interesting kind of shift on the Count of Monte Cristo in a way where Red, her mentor, is sort of almost more like a philosophical, like spiritual, like kind of guide, I would say, to kind of help her hone her already pretty amazing ability, which I think is a really cool twist. Like, she doesn't need to really learn anything. It's more just like, how does she like see the world differently in order to like use that gift in a different way. I think it's interesting. And so
yeah, you nailed it.
maybe well, one of the things I was hoping to ask you was sort of where the relationship between Red and Joe came about. What sort of inspired that relationship, I guess you could say, in the writing.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. When I was reading The Count of Monte Cristo, that character, you know, the priest character, he really just, he's so central to the transformation of Edmond Dantes, and he makes the Count. Like, especially, yes, I've read the book, which is amazing and stuck with me for months. I was just like, And I didn't swim the Chateau d'If, but I did live in France after reading that. And I was like reenacting it in my head wherever I went. When I was like, the sea, you know, like I was just like living it in my head. But I love that character. And I knew I wanted a character like that in my book because, and also in the book, The Count of Monte Cristo, he has multiple identities. Do you remember?
That's right.
And so I had this thought, you know, and it wasn't necessarily exactly from Count of Monte Cristo when I first developed all the characters, you know, Octavia and Double A and Phoenix and all that stuff. Like that wasn't really, that kind of just developed as I was writing. But I really wanted that character, that mentor that could help speak, like what you were saying, mentor her into an identity and a way to see the world, that her gift can be used for the purpose that she was called to. And so, and somebody else in another interview asked me, they're like, do you have a Red in your life? And I would definitely say yes. Like I've had multiple Reds, and those people that do speak those things and do change the way you see the world are so important and so key. And I really wanted that. And a mentor, you know, is pretty popular in young adult novels. You know, there's the mentor trope, but I wanted Red to be, I wanted him to really have that, you know, that gusto in him, that punch that other people didn't. And I knew that I didn't want Joe to be, because a lot of YA books today is like they're being trained to fight, you know, and they're being trained to kick butt, you know. And I was like, I know I don't want my character to be able to physically fight this battle. Like I wanted her to use her mind and use her gift and use what was inside of her, but she didn't know how. She didn't know what she could give. And so like creating that was really fun.
That's awesome.
I'm obsessed with that sentence that you just said. Like, I didn't want her to have to be able to physically fight with that, but you wanted her to bring what was inside of her out and actually use that. Oh my God, that's beautiful.
She's like a Batman in a way, where she uses her wits and her brain.
Yeah,
too. It's a really exciting book. I loved these books. I read these books in a weekend to get like back to back while I was packing my apartment. So I was listening to the audiobooks and just couldn't get enough of them. They were really, really fantastic. We are talking to Nova McBee, the author of the Calculated series. If you've got questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat. We are standing by and waiting for your calls, callers. You're listening to KW Legion M. We're having a great chat with Nova McBee. So another thing that I was really, actually, you know, how about this? We got a question from Twitter a little while ago, which was, what was the main inspiration from the series? That was from Vegas Vamp on Twitter. And I would love to know, especially where you came up with the idea of the world for Calculated.
Oh my gosh. Wow. You know, this book was, it developed over a course of like 2 years. But I was living in China. This is like, why is it Shanghai? I was born in Seattle. I lived in China for 13 plus years. I speak the language. I've had lots of adventures in China. So I actually really wanted to write a story in China, but I just couldn't think of one. And actually, Mandy, thinking of your fantasy, I read The Count of Monte Cristo, and I was currently going to like anti-trafficking meetings, and I was just like, and The Count of Monte Cristo says it's unstable. Are you guys still tracking me?
Oh, you're back.
You're back.
Yeah, so just like having those different things merged together, like anti-trafficking, Count of Monte Cristo, what would that look like today? And I was like, it would definitely be a girl, you know, well, where would it be? Like, you know, because, you know, where would it be today? And I was living in China, and I was like, this is obvious. I want this story to be in China. And then thinking about her superpower, I knew I wanted her to have something, and I am not a math person. So the math, that when I was like, she should use math, I'm like, why? Why? Why did this brain say math? Because it was really difficult to do. And I'm just like, you know, sometimes we don't even know why or how like these ideas come. And like, I had no clue how hard it would be when I first chose that. And so developing this world and this story really came with a lot of different elements, actually. And like I was telling Mandy earlier, like I've also lived in Italy. So you see these parts of like my experiences abroad. I've lived in 7 countries. I speak other languages. And so I've always loved that global environment. And actually, when I first started to get on Twitter, I was such a newbie. I was so just green. I was just like, ooh, I should create something called Global YA. And it didn't catch, but I feel like that's still what I read. And so just having that like global cast, that diverse cast, even before like those hashtags of like, we need diversity, like I was like, I want a global cast. I want like all the nations kind of like in this story. And so there's all those pieces that kind of developed that world. But speaking of the math, because I know one of your questions before we were talking about, you know, how did you get her math brain and like develop her gift? That was crazy hard. And it took so much research. And like I did well, like in school with math, but I never like, after I was done, I was like, I'm not doing that if I have to, you know? And I'm like, I learn languages really easily. But anyway, so going into the math research was incredibly cool and incredibly hard because I had to reread things all the time and I had to envision like, what do I want her to see and what kind of math is that? And what do I want her to do? And what does that translate as in terms of real math? Because I wanted it based in reality. I wanted her gifting based in reality. And then I read about I don't even know how many prodigies I researched, like what kind of people really exist in this world. And it's incredible, like how many geniuses really exist. And fun fact, I've been asked if I'm a genius lots of times since writing this book. And I'm like, oh.
And the answer is yes. The answer is yes.
I play one on TV.
It's been really fun because I'm like, if you would have seen my headaches, you know, just like the tears, you know, the real tears of like, I can't get this scene right. And, but just like knowing that creatives can have fun, we can use our imagination, and then we can actually do the hard work of research to get it right. And I just like all at the right time. It was just cool. This book had like all those right moments where I would meet up with somebody who had the answer. And I remember very clearly one Sunday meeting up with this new girl, and I didn't have time to talk to her, but I knew I was like, you know what? No, because I wanted to rush home and just work on Calculated. And I was like, no, that's not who I am. I have time for people. And I sat down and talked to this new girl. And she turned out to be a math teacher who taught me all about differential equations and solved my whole problem. Like that was the problem I wanted.
That's so exciting.
Yes, it was awesome. It was like stuff like that. I was like, how can I get her to do this thing? And then when she taught me about differential equations, I went and researched. I'm like, that is exactly what I need her to do. So then after I had that like key thing, I was able to research out from that everything, which eventually even led into Simulated, which was awesome. Like even simulations come from equations. Yes, and now I sound like a total math nerd because, and I am. I am smarter because I wrote these books, and I'm a math nerd now. Like, I just never thought that would happen, but it did. Yes, I'm a total math nerd. So
I feel like in some ways it's
amazing. See, that was like one of my biggest.
Go ahead, Mandy. No, you go.
Go ahead, Mandy. Yeah.
That's one of my biggest questions with this, because I shouldn't be saying this as the VP of merchandising and licensing, but I was terrible at math. Like, I actually, from the time I was in like first grade all the way through college, I had a math tutor because I just couldn't, like, it didn't click for me. Like, English was great, art was great, like, but math I couldn't compute. So I had to work really, really hard to learn everything to do with math. So I was going to ask you, like, how you did that. Like, did you have consultants at any point? Like, did you or was it mostly just your own research that you were able to get through it, or did you have consultants that helped you with the math part?
So a lot of it was my own research, because if you don't need to read, you don't need to know math to read the book. You guys know that. And there's no actually, like, he's not actually doing any math. If you read closely, you'll see, like, I'm implying all the math, but so if I actually needed equations to write this book, I would not have written this book, right?
Joe does it for you, thankfully.
Yeah, Joe does it for you. You don't need to know math. You just see the world through her lens. She sees graphs, numbers, predictions, equations, sizes, dimensions. She sees all of this stuff, and they're constantly in a state of motion that makes these differential equations kind of say, okay, if the ball's going to fall, it's going to fall this way and that kind of stuff. So, but after I wrote it, I did have several math teachers read through it and an engineer, and they also came back to like, how did you write this? This is amazing. It's so real. And so I was just like, wow, that's incredible. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, the research is, if you can get the imagination coupled with research and just say it in a more creative way. I guess I'm a creative person like you, Mandy. It's like the creativity is really easy for me. Like learning languages is easy for me, but like filling out a form is hard. I'm like, headache. So it's like, we're all different, actually that's kind of like the book. We all have our different gifts,
Yeah, if I can like ask another question on flow.
Absolutely.
So Alexis Machine on Twitter said, "Yay STEM," and that's exactly what I said the first time that I started reading it was, a STEM novel, yes. And then so were you setting out to make a STEM novel, or did it just kind of evolve into that?
And for those at home, what is STEM? Just in case.
Oh, please, Nova, you can explain that.
Science, technology, engineering, and math. No, is E engineering?
Yes.
I believe
Engineering,
so, yeah.
Yep, that's it.
So, all this, the smart people out there, they know this better than
Not
us.
to put you on the spot, I was like, I'll tell them what it is. Wait, what is it again? It's like science and math,
Science, yes.
T&D in the middle. But yes, it's an awesome, example of a STEM novel. So please continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it wasn't originally going to be a STEM novel, because when I started mapping out Calculated, I didn't actually know what kind of superpower she was going to have. And it's funny that we call it a superpower, because I didn't want it to be a superpower. I didn't want her to be like superhuman or anything like, but even the producers, the One Door Studio producers are like, it's kind of like a superpower. I'm like, no, it's not. We're like arguing.
We tend to talk about things in terms of superpowers here. So it's sort of just like our default nomenclature for a lot of stuff. But
I mean, we're all nerds, right? But like, I love but at the same time, that's why I love this story so much. I mean, I'm a huge nerd. Everyone knows this is a Harry Potter tattoo. Like, I love fantasy. Give me a dragon and I'm happy. But the reason why I love the story so much is because, like, she could be real. She's actually in a real life setting, although she has this superhuman ability that is set in reality, and that's so fresh. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool.
There are
showing my nerddom right now. I'm fangirling over this story. I'll pull it back a little bit.
No, don't pull it back. I love it. It's great. And I totally agree. It's a superpower. It's like a super ability, and it gives her, but she's still human. Like you said, Mandy, she still needs to learn. She's still coming into who she is and what she's supposed to do. And then simulated, like, I don't want to give spoilers. I feel like if everyone's read it, then it's great. But
many people I don't think have. But
okay.
So maybe just like not too many spoilers or no spoilers.
But then simulated, she has to see a whole different side of herself and learn to still, we're always kind of evolving in who we are, and Red has awesome things to say about that too. And just, every year. And I feel like even for myself personally, because I have lived in so many different places, I have had to like, who am I in this place? Like, and I have to be myself and learn how to make new friends and understand a new place. And I have to find everything again. And that's something that I do identify with Joe, because somebody was like, do you identify with Joe? I'm like, not really. Well, actually I do, in the terms of like cross-cultural. I've had to do that a lot. Like, I don't understand you and I better learn your language, and just like how I've lived cross-culturally for over 20 years abroad. And I grew up in a multicultural home with another language. And with internationals living with us. And so I've done cross culture my whole life. And that's something that I really do identify with Joe, like wanting to come in and wanting to be an insider, you know, and wanting to, in China, it's hard to be an insider because, you know, but in Italy, I could get away with that in certain times, you know, but in China it was harder to do. But I did have some fun facts if there are no questions right now.
Sure. Well, there are a few in the chat.
Okay, let's do those first.
Okay, great. Yeah. So Carolina Romero has said, this reminds me of the math love I had after reading Carl Sagan's Contact and Cryptonomicon by Neil Stephenson. For those that aren't mathematically inclined, it still makes for an exciting read and inspires curiosity on the subject. I think she's talking about Calculated. Has Nova read these books? Is a question.
No, I haven't. Good question. I will mark them down to take a look.
And then Megan Walvard asks, excuse me, sorry, I'm not wearing my contacts. And I guess now 3 feet is too far for me not to wear contacts. Getting older. Which character came to you first? Was another question from Megan Walvard.
Good question.
Oh, okay. Yes. Joe obviously was actually my first character. And I've told this to other writer friends before, but this is kind of new, that this story didn't start where it starts now. It actually was written chronologically to begin with, and it actually started with her putting lilies on her mother's grave. Started out with like her visiting her mom's grave. That was like one of the first scenes I ever wrote. And so having this, and I was just imagining her first as a kid losing her mom, and a lot of those scenes are gone. Like all those scenes are gone, actually. All those original scenes that I wrote. And it's so interesting the way characters develop and how you have this idea of a character and what's going to happen to them. But then you have to spend time developing who they are and what they went through. And it's a really weird process, to be honest, because you're like, what happened to them? Who are they? Like, what hardships have they had? What strengths do they have? What kind of personality do they have? You're like literally creating a human, you know, it's a really weird process. So Joe came to me first, and then next was her dad, and then was Kai. And once I had Kai in the picture, the whole story started to come together. Yeah.
Amazing.
We need love interest for the story to come together.
Kai's a cool. I want to hang out with Kai. I want to teach me some martial arts. On Facebook, Alan Leota asks, when writing, do you go down any plot lines that then don't pan out? And have you had to back out of a plot line to go a different way?
So many times, especially writing Calculated. Calculated was the very first novel that I wrote from beginning to end. Meaning like I've written like other books or stories before, but I never went back and revised them and stuff. So Calculated actually was like, I wanted to actually give up on it lots because it was really hard to write. And like I said, I wrote it chronologically at first. I was like, this is not working. This is not good. I don't like it. I don't like how it feels. It doesn't feel right to me. And I wrote so many scenes, and my husband can tell you, because I made him read everything like 50 times. So he's like, which version is published? Because he's like, read so many different types of Calculateds. So many scenes were cut. So many scenes. Like I had this killer scene with her and her dad in a business meeting, you know, because we read the backstory of it all.
Yes.
He helped her dad get the fortune. But I had a killer scene where she's in with her dad at the, like in the meeting and how she's advising him. I had to cut it, you know, and people were like, that one's too mathy, too economical, they were like saying, you know, it's not YA enough. You have to cut it. And I took their advice, and there were a few more economical scenes that I cut that just, it read maybe a little bit too high for YA. So, and then there was like some crazy scenes that I was just like with King that I was like, I wrote it. I'm like, no, it's too scary. You take it out, you know, or something. And I mean, I tested a lot of scenes. And so, yeah, I have an enormous folder that I hope nobody ever finds with all my deleted scenes.
So exciting to know.
I mean, I'll just have to hire someone like Joe to go find them. Like,
John.
No, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, okay. I will say that I've grown as a writer, and so the next book that I wrote from beginning to end, I did not have a lot of deleted scenes. I was much more like focused on a very direct plot, and I knew where I was going. Where Calculated, as you guys know, turned into a dual timeline, which was incredibly hard to do, to make two timelines feed into each other and be fascinating to each other. And something when this story won like a kind of a contest into a mentorship called Pitch Wars in 2016. The story's been around a while. And my mentor, Pintip Dunn, she was like, okay, you need to sharpen your timelines. You need to give me relevant, like more information in each timeline that I'm chomping at the bit to get back, like, but I'm falling in love. Like, they were already there, but she definitely gave me some awesome advice to sharpen those timelines. That was really hard to do. But once we had the timelines, I was like, oh, this is a good story. I won't give up on it, even though I really did want to for years.
That's
so
amazing.
glad you didn't.
Yeah.
Thank you. You too.
When you write with your process, do you typically sort of like just charge through blank pages, or do you outline, or what's like a typical writing day for you?
I definitely outline. I outlined all of Calculated in a day. I had the idea. It was like a download, you know. I was just like, I could see it in my head, and I was like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what I want to do. Which then I took 2.5 years. Which, you know, Simulated took less than 8 months. So it's like the first book was really my learning curve. It was my learning book. So I outline a lot, but I'm also the story. For me, I've noticed this a lot. Like, the story has to take place in my head first. I have to daydream. I know that's like my job. It's like daydreaming. Go and take a bath and daydream. Go take a walk. Go sit on the beach and just stare into space. But like, everything's going on in my head, and I really let it sit and simmer. And I do a lot of research, and that's really fun. Living in China, it was fun because I could just go out and research things and see things. But with Simulated, I was here. It was COVID. I was writing it during COVID in my parents' downstairs basement, you know, so it wasn't very exciting to see anything. But I was just reading a lot. Like, I let the story simmer in my head. I play through conversations in my head, and I dream about what these scenes will look like and how the story is going to progress. Even though I try to outline extensively and then follow my outline, and it doesn't always work. Because once you get into the page, it doesn't always go as it does in your head. And then you have to say, you know what, and thankfully I have critique partners who are like, this scene has no stakes, go back. You know, it's like, there's no, like, what's the point? You know, they're nice. They're really nice. They would never just like say it like the way I just did. But, but they're telling me like, hey, this scene doesn't have high enough stakes, and it's kind of boring, and your books are thrilling. So you need to go back. And I'm actually thinking of a scene with Cotter, Abdul Cotter, the bodyguard in Simulated. That was one of my friends. She just was like, no, you need to up the stakes with him right now. And because I listened, he became such a deeper character, a funner character, a more high stakes character, and I love him. And some people have actually told me that Cotter is their favorite character of Simulated, which is really funny. I love it.
That's cool. How I feel like I almost feel like in a lot of ways, you know, would you say that maybe just after writing the first one, having the established characters maybe just foundationally made it easier to then take them on a new adventure, perhaps, I guess? Or was it even just the plot itself was like, oh, I have it. This will take no time.
So for Simulated, I would say I mapped out what I wanted, but I didn't always know how to do it. And that's, I think, where writing these fantasy books is it's easier, but writing this series, and I've told my publisher this too, she might be watching, hi. But I've told her, like, this series is so hard to write. And I guess I'm not a genius, because it actually does take a lot of work for me to write this series, because I feel like it is actually smarter than me. And the prodigies are smarter than me. And so I knew I couldn't have a very simple plot. I needed a very complex, layered, deep and thick, full of action and intrigue and also depth in the plot. Like, I wanted it to be that. And then all the layers of math that I want to put in. And so with Simulated, I knew what I wanted to do. I just had to figure out how to do it. And so to make it smart. And so, yeah, that.
Okay, so if I can say, I mean, hopefully I'm not gushing too much, but like you saying that right now, I have respect for the bravery it took for you to take on that responsibility and that work to actually make a book that was so hard to write. And like, that's just incredible. That's just absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
So much respect to you right now.
Thank you. Seriously.
Speaking of respect and conversation too, I have another question that I'd love to talk about, and we don't have to go too deep into this, but of course, since it is part of the conversation right now, and you know, of course, especially in our country, I'd love to talk to you just very briefly about the fact that it is so diverse, and what that means to you. You know, being an author that wrote an extremely diverse and an important story like this. What does that mean for you? And was that hard at all when it came to publishing and all of that?
I would say yes. Just in our climate, it was, you know, I was a little like hesitant, you know, because it was taking place in China and I'm not Chinese. And I've had, you know, actually, because I've lived in China, all my Chinese friends are like, we can't wait for this book to be published. We love it, you know, and they're so for me and they read it. And, you know, something that China has really taught me, and just even living there with the community that I did, it was just like, when you're writing diversity, it's all about honor, you know, like honoring each other. And that was like what I wanted to do. I wanted to walk away feeling like I really honored these characters, honor this culture that I personally have learned a lot from. Like, I have learned so much from Chinese people, my Chinese friends, and the Chinese culture in general, the Chinese language, like even the Chinese language, learning Chinese is like, it is completely amazing, because it has a lesson and a story and a history in every single character. And you're blown away. You're just blown away. And so for me, writing such a diverse cast was mostly about honor. Like, I wanted people to feel honored. And when I've had other Chinese read it, they have emailed me, and this is where I'm like, oh my gosh, I know I'm honored, because they're just like, you made me proud. You made me proud. You know who we are. And I was just like, oh, it's like tears, because like that was my heart. Like, I loved where I was with who I was for how long I was. And it was just like such a deep part of my life. So yeah. And I hope to do that with every book, you know, and honor is something they like really value over there. And I love that. It's an important value.
We love it, especially. Yeah, it's a wonderful book. In fact, to continue the compliment meteor shower, we've got Amy Jameson on Facebook says, Calculated is such an awesome read. I love the setting in Shanghai and all the Chinese cultural insights. Now the chat's moving. And Joe's story arc is very cool from beginning. And Joe's arc is very cool. Going from the sheltered teen focused on studying and developing her math skills, then being kidnapped and thrown into the underworld of China and having to use her skills in a completely different way to keep herself alive. It's a total thriller, but also really deep. So she's definitely very appreciative. It's a cool plot.
Awesome.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Nova McBee, the author of Calculated, which is a series of novels that we are developing with One Door Studios to hopefully, fingers crossed, turn into the next amazing feature film. Next, we compare it to the Hunger Games in scope and size and tone. It's a really cool, exciting, big story, which is really, really fun. And let's see. So we actually had another question, sort of maybe even transitioning a little bit towards maybe some of the movie side of things. John Biscardi, hey John, Hey,
John.
We love John Biscardi. He says, did you visualize any actors as you wrote the story?
No.
Oh.
No. And people have asked me that, and that's embarrassing. I couldn't visualize any actors or actresses. And eventually I looked, like once I kind of joined the YA community online, and they were all doing these aesthetics, and they kind of do their Pinterest boards, and I was just like, ooh, this looks so cool. I want to try one. And I looked around and I found a guy that looked like Kai in my mind. And then I found out he was Korean. I'm like, oh no, like I got to stick with the Chinese guy. And then, so eventually I did find some actors, but it wasn't while I was writing it. It was afterwards.
Interesting.
And now lots of people, I've been asking people suggestions. And so I'm getting lots of suggestions on the Instagram. Like, have you thought of this person for Madam? Have you thought of this person for Joe? And so now I'm actually really appreciative of suggestions, because even the producers ask me, they're like, who do you envision for this? I'm like, oh, I don't know. But they have to be like the character to really do it, right? You know. So I was just like, but Red, he has to be like Red to play Red, which, you know, may or may not happen. But.
Okay, so like, I gotta tell you, first of all, I obviously the actor needs to be Chinese, but I absolutely pictured every single one of the BTS group as Kai. Like, I don't know why, but like all the BTS guys were like in my head as Kai. And for Madam, Charlize Theron was in my head the entire time. Like, okay. I don't know about y'all, but like for some reason she was there the whole time as Madam. And like her short, you know, pixie cut.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. Yeah.
Taylor, did you picture anybody?
I don't know if I necessarily pictured anyone specific. I don't know. It's interesting. Sometimes with novels, I tend to like just let them be more amorphous in my imagination, I guess. I don't know. Especially because sometimes they're POVs, you know, especially when you're writing from someone's character. A lot of times I just float through a novel looking through that person's eyes, I guess. I don't know. Instead of watching it as a play. Yeah. That's a really deep way to say no, I didn't.
I'm a reader, and I think I'm primarily a reader as well. And so even people, you know, now going into simulated, people were like, how did you visualize Noble? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I know how I described him, but in my head, it was all about who he was. Like, it was about their backstory, their relationship, you know, like that kind of stuff. So yes, I'm open to whoever they choose. I'm like, look, I'm excited for everyone else's picks. You know what I mean? And the producers are so cool, because they're like, no, we want you to be happy, and we want your say, and we want to have all of your opinions. And that is amazing. They have been just above and beyond, like inviting me into every aspect of the process. And that is like my agent. She's like, that's not, you don't find that everywhere.
That is absolutely wonderful. I will tell you this, and I'm not going to name any names or throw anybody under the bus, but there have been some of my favorite YA novels that have been translated to film that the author was not really that involved, and in my opinion, they were not given the right vision, just because the author wasn't involved, and that so that's great to hear that you're going to be involved through the whole process.
Yeah, no, they've involved me every step of the way. They've just like shared things with me. We've been able to get together to get excited about certain things and talk through things, and they have been incredible. So, and then
awesome.
Now you guys too.
And now we're a part of it. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Nova McBee, author of Calculated. We're going to take a quick 2-minute break where you can see a cool video voiced over by yours truly, just to kind of give you another window into what we're doing with Legion M and Calculated and One Door Studios. And when we come back, we've got some fun facts about the Calculated books that Nova has brought for us to take a look at. So we'll be right back.
Calculated. It's a book. 8 inches by 5 inches, 448 pages, 93.5% chance it's printed on 50-pound white smooth offset paper. Matte finish. Nailed it. But it's not just a book, it's a novel. A novel is infinitely cooler than a book and has 25% more letters. Calculated is a modern Count of Monte Cristo set in Shanghai and follows a teenage prodigy named Josephine with a gift, the ability to quantify and calculate everything. We follow Jo on an action-fueled Hunger Games-sized adventure as she uses her genius to hunt down her betrayers. Chance of goosebumps by the end of page 35, 84.7%. Chance we'll tell you what's on page 35, 0%. Chance we hate spoilers, 100%. This is Legion M's first young adult property, which means we're increasing the amount of young adult properties in our slate by 100%, or infinity. We don't know. We're not math geniuses. But you know who are geniuses? Our partners. Meet Jason Brents, John J. Lee Jr., Stephen Woolworth, and Jill Stutzman. 23 major studio-released movies and series between them that have earned over $4 billion in revenue, 220,000 followers on social media, 5 Js, and a drone. And we're not just saying that. Stephen actually helped pioneer drone aerial cinematography. There's a 67.7% probability that you stopped listening after the word drone and started thinking, oh, wow. All right, that's enough. Legion M has joined forces with the Calculated team to bring this book to the screen. As a Legion M investor, you already own a small stake in Calculated, but if you're excited about this project and want to get even more involved, you can invest directly in Calculated on WeFunder, where our partners have already raised over $500,000 for the project. $535,081 times 577 investors equals a ton of hype for Calculated already. They're offering a 110% ROI plus 50% of the net profits to be divided among the direct investors if the movie is successful, and we believe it can be. 577 direct investors plus Legion M's 30,000 investors plus 4 epic creators, that makes us 30,581 plus 1 drone. Nice. Learn more about Calculated on WeFunder or pick up a signed copy of the novel and the sequel Simulated in the Legion M store. Calculated. We bet there's a 100% chance you will love it. Calculated. It's a book. 8 inches by 5 inches. 448.
Whoops, never can do these transitions perfectly, but we are back with Nova McBee, the author of the Calculated series, which Legion M is developing into an epic feature film with One Door Studios. So Nova, there are some fun facts that you've brought to share with us about just the novel itself. And, you know, for those who may be just joining or haven't read the book Calculated, you don't necessarily need to know the book completely in order to have some fun and to ask your questions. So feel free to ask Nova any questions. We're going to be looking at the chat on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and we'll relay them in. So yeah, Nova, I'm excited to hear some of these fun facts, especially about your writing and about the book.
Cool. Well, I kind of already shared one, which was it was written chronologically, because people have wondered about that. Like, how did you first craft this story? And so that was one of my fun facts that I already shared. And another fun fact was the original title that I first sent out to agents was actually called Cell 88. That was what I was titling it.
Interesting.
And yes, can you imagine?
I would have thought it would be like a medical drama with that title.
Yeah.
I think we've frozen briefly.
It was.
There you go. You're back. And you're back. Sorry.
Oh, I wonder if it's spotty. No, it's got to be my internet. Yeah, so that was, I actually love hearing authors' original titles, and actually I chose Calculated as well, so it is my original title. But I couldn't name it for so long, for 2 years. For 2 years, I couldn't think of a name I liked, and so for 2 years that book was called Cell 88, and then I realized, well, yeah, it is fascinating. And then I looked over, I'm like, she says Calculated a lot. Oh my gosh, I should call it Calculated. It was like this. I love it. I absolutely love it. And another fun fact was, I also touched on this in your interview, was it was written as a standalone. I was not gonna do a series because, like I said, it was so hard to write. It was so hard to pretend to be a genius. But then I left it open-ended. Like you guys know, there's those two sort of major hooks at the very end of the book. Just leaving it open-ended definitely wraps up, but then it leaves these two threads. And I actually had a little tiny idea of what I could do. And my husband had been to Tunisia and had been talking to me about the Bardo Museum. And I was like, ooh, if I write a second book. It's going to be in that Bardo Museum. And so that was like the beginning of my simulated idea. Like I knew I had a vague idea of what I wanted to do, but I knew we had to meet in the Bardo Museum. Like that was just key. And so anyway, and fun fact, writing simulated, I had to do a lot of helicopter simulations. That was super fun. I actually did lots. I did simulations, guys. I actually went into iFly Seattle, and I was like in a wind tunnel, and like, how does it feel to fall? How does it feel like this? I did like the virtual simulations. I did helicopter simulations because I was like all about like, I need to write these well. And so that was kind of fun research that you did. And fun fact, I was trying to do research in
Oh no, we froze again.
I'm just going to pretend to be frozen too for a second.
Me being followed in these seriously, I went out, like I left my kids with my husband. I'm like, I'm going to do research. And but it was all about riding the subways and going out on these alleys. And like, I literally convinced myself that I was being followed. And I'm like, oh,
that's so really scary. This was
so cool.
Was this like, sorry, we lost about 10 seconds of time just at the beginning of the story. Was this still in Seattle, or was this in Shanghai where you went and then?
This was in Shanghai.
Oh, that's
This was
crazy.
in Shanghai. And no, it was really funny. I mean, I was like trying to reenact the scene just for fun. You know, I was like riding the subway and getting off at different stops and like seeing what I would feel like and what I would look around and see. And then literally I was like, I think that guy actually is following me. And then eventually I was like, no, he's not. You're just like way into the story. But fun fact, I actually have one of my best Chinese friends actually lived in the French Quarter. And so it was really, really fun. And she is nothing like Madame. She's actually like amazing, this amazing woman, but works in the fashion industry in Shanghai. And I've gotten to go, my husband and I have gotten to go into expos. And so there's like behind the scenes is kind of cool. Like when you see, and then I have also a really good friend in the financial district outside of Shanghai who, you know, it's just like all these little fun facts behind the scenes. Like why the French concession, you know, it's like you know, one of my best friends lives in that area and the fashion. Another fun fact, I did plant mandel in Calculated.
Oh, really?
Yes, page 35.
Huh.
Page 35. Everyone sort of just reads past that little line where I talk about the boy from the blog.
Interesting.
That never told her his name because there's a scene where they're like, but, you know, don't you like this guy? And she's talking about the boy from her economics class. And they're like, what about that boy from your blog? And she's like, oh, he never even told me his real name, you know, and I shut that blog down and like, but nobody sees it. And so I'm telling people now.
That's so interesting. And so like when you're working on these characters and you're building this backstory, like was Mandel as built out as he was in Simulated? Or was it sort of like a kernel of an idea that you were like, maybe I'll return to this later? Or was it like, well, now I got to write a sequel because I wrote this whole backstory on this character who is in one line?
So I actually, when I had the idea for Simulated, I went back in and I wrote him in. Yeah, he wasn't in there in the beginning.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I planted him. Yeah. And it's a very subtle plant, but no one notices it. And so I'm like, guys, you guys, and actually this is a fun fact. I have had, I don't know how many messages because I'm not Joe, but I've had so many messages of people saying that they have read both books twice. And countless readers have read them twice, back to back. And that is a major compliment to me. Then there's a scene on page 335 where she says, maybe, so Kai's like, what are you going to do now that you don't have your gift, you know? And she's like, oh, maybe I'll try something ridiculously hard, like writing a book. Did anyone catch that?
I might have. I feel like I did pick up on that.
I don't in that context, but now it's amazing.
It's so funny because I'm like, that line is for me. That is for me.
Did you put yourself in the book anywhere, just like as a bystander or anything? Like, who is it? Oh my gosh, I'm totally forgetting. I'm spacing on the director's name now. But, you know, like how you do cameos sometimes in your own films. Did you do a cameo in your book where you were like, oh, and then somebody got knocked over in the market? And it's like, that was me.
That was me. No.
I love that. It's like instead of fan service, it's like self-author service.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I like you know, trying to encourage myself, you know, like so I gotta applaud you because you've worked really hard. And
amazing.
Dylan Gafford in the chat is saying Stan Lee. Yes, maybe, but I was actually thinking of somebody else. Hold on, you're gonna hate me when I actually stop having this brain fart. Alfred Hitchcock. That's who I was thinking of. Hitchcock always would like walk in the background of his films and things, so it'd be funny to just be like, oh, and then oh, my friend Nova. Oh yeah, such and such, one line, just in the book.
And you know the Twilight author was actually at Bella's wedding. In the wedding scene for Bella and Edward. Yeah, she was actually sitting in the audience.
Yeah, like Lee Bardugo in Shadow and Bone. She was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, and Angie Thomas was also in That Hate You Give, like in the street, the riot scene. So.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool. I'll have to look for that next time.
When the authors see the author in their movie, they're like, oh, just like it's tears because we all know, like, we've worked really hard, and to see that happen is like, it's just an incredible honor, and it's huge, you know?
We got to talk to the One Door Studios team and just be like, we need to get Nova a cameo in this movie when it happens.
Yeah,
maybe in Tunisia. I'll be one of the people riding the camels in the back.
Oh, that'd be so great. Well, we're coming down to the end of our time here. Thank you so much, Nova, for coming and spending a bunch of time with us, and it's been great getting to know you, especially just on a personal, professional level. It's amazing to read your books and hear a lot of the stories behind them. I'm going to give everyone in the chat just one more opportunity. If you have any last questions that you'd like to ask. If not, you can always, I'm saying this to the future people who are watching this on demand later tonight in the future. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section of either the Facebook or the YouTube live stream that'll be saved on our pages so that you can, and we'll try our best we'll forward them to you. And then you can send them back to us, and we'll do like a little relay type of thing if anybody who's watching in the future has any questions. Otherwise, we're really excited about this project, especially. Not only, everybody on the team at One Door Studios is really cool, but you're really fantastic. And, and let's be honest, like we're fantastic too. Like, especially Legion M, the team, the community and everyone at Legion M is just so amazing, especially, all the members and investors. They're really, really fantastic. And so we're excited to be a part of the whole thing. So Mandy, I guess, is there anything that you would want to tell people about where they could find Calculated if they wanted to read it, if you haven't read it yet?
Absolutely. So yes, Calculated and Simulated are both on audiobook. Taylor, did you read it on Kindle? Is that where you read it? Or was it on Amazon?
I did Audible.
Okay, so Audible for the audiobooks. And then, of course, you can get them on Amazon and things like that as well for e-readers. But we have in the Legion M store right now, if you go to shop.legionm.com, go to signed merch, that Nova has graciously and amazingly signed us. So you can either get the Calculated book alone, Simulated book alone, or you can get both books, signed copies together for a lower price. So please go to shop.legionm.com and grab your signed copy. And Nova, they're selling out fast, so I might need to ask you to sign more soon.
Yeah.
Yay!
They've got signatures in them, which is super cool. So there we go.
You guys are really awesome. I've had a blast, and I've just been so impressed with you. And for everyone who's watching, that guy down there made that incredible promo video. And if you haven't seen that, watch it, because it's so fun.
I'll probably roll it as an outro one last time. Thanks, everybody. I'll share this with the community too. I was saying this before we actually went live today. Fun fact. Here's my fun fact. If you ever hear my voiceovers on any Legion M content, I do them in my closet because we don't have a sound booth. And so in order to deaden the echoes, I just stand in between the hanging clothes and just sort of like have the microphone here. And that's why it sounds not quite professional.
Killing it, Taylor. Killing it.
Oh my gosh. Dilla Gafferin says, dork in the best way. Too. I love you too, Dilla Gafferin.
Accurate.
Amazing. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today, especially everyone who's maybe taking time out of their workday or their dinner time or anything. We really appreciate you being here live with us. Thank you for your amazing questions, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Nova.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Calculated. It's a book. 8 inches by 5 inches, 448 pages, 93.5% chance it's printed on 50-pound white smooth offset paper. Matte finish. Nailed it. But it's not just a book, it's a novel. A novel is infinitely cooler than a book and has 25% more letters. Calculated is a modern Count of Monte Cristo set in Shanghai and follows a teenage prodigy named Josephine with a gift, the ability to quantify and calculate everything. We follow Jo on an action-fueled Hunger Games-sized adventure as she uses her genius to hunt down her betrayers. Chance of goosebumps by the end of page 35, 84.7%. Chance we'll tell you what's on page 35, 0%. Chance we hate spoilers, 100%. This is Legion M's first young adult property, which means we're increasing the amount of young adult properties in our slate by 100%, or infinity. We don't know. We're not math geniuses. But you know who are geniuses? Our partners. Meet Jason Brents, John J. Lee Jr., Stephen Woolworth, and Jill Stutzman. 23 major studio-released movies and series between them that have earned over $4 billion in revenue, 220,000 followers on social media, 5 J's, and a drone. And we're not just saying that. Stephen actually helped pioneer drone aerial cinematography. There's a 67.7% probability that you stopped listening after the word drone and started thinking, oh. Wow. All right, that's enough. Legion M has joined forces with the Calculated team to bring this book to the screen. As a Legion M investor, you already own a small stake in Calculated, but if you're excited about this project and want to get even more involved, you can invest directly in Calculated on WeFunder, where our partners have already raised over $500,000 for the project. $535,081 times 577 investors equals a ton of hype for Calculated already. They're offering a 110% ROI plus 50% of the net profits to be divided among the direct investors if the movie is successful, and we believe it can be. 577 direct investors plus Legion M's 30,000 investors plus 4 epic creators, that makes us 30,581 plus 1 drone. Nice. Learn more about Calculated on WeFunder or pick up a signed copy of the novel and the sequel Simulated in the Legion M store. Calculated. We bet there's a 100% chance you will love it.